Okay, ready for the last chapter. Moo Man is still here, sleeping. I hope none of you are sleeping at home. But, where are you going? He's awake now. Okay, chapter 30 Rainbow. There was no stove in the cafeteria kitchen. An enormous pot hung from a thick chain above a blazing fire. Lower the pot, ordered Miss Mush. Mr. Pepperator turned the squeaky crank, and the pot came down. What will it be today? He asked. Shh, said Miss Mush. Mr. Pepperator knew better. You must never interrupt a great artist during her moment of inspiration. Miss Mush's eyes were closed. She rubbed her chin. She wanted to make something truly special after the storm of doom. Rainbow stew, she declared, as she raised her wooden spoon high above her head. Brilliant, agreed Mr. Pepperator. What do we have that's red? Asked Miss Mush. Mr. Pepperator looked over his inventory list. Red cabbage, he said. Beets, strawberries, red peppers. Miss Mush waved the wooden spoon and said, Toss them in the pot. Flames shot up as Mr. Pepperator threw in the ingredients. He had to shield his eyes from the smoke. What about yellow? Asked Miss Mush. Yellow squash, bananas, yellow peppers, yellow onions. Start with the bananas, said Miss Mush. And then we'll see about the onions. Mr. Pepperator started to peel a banana, but Miss Mush stopped him. The peel is the part that's yellow, she reminded him. If I wanted white, I would have asked for peeled bananas. Sorry, said Mr. Pepperator. He tossed 57 bushels of bananas, peels and all, into the pot. Oh, you don't want this chapter, Moose? Okay. Into the pot. There was a loud hissing noise as steam filled the room. Some cooks consider things like taste or perhaps nutrition when preparing a meal. For Rainbow Stew, color was all that mattered. Miss Mush stirred the pot with a large stick. Perhaps a little black for now, for definition, she said. Mr. Pepperator read from the list. Poppy seeds, burnt toast, my shoes. High above them, in Mrs. Jules's class, several children held their noses. What's that smell? Asked Calvin. Miss Mush must be cooking something, said Beebe. It smells like shoes, said Myron. DJ sniffed. Black shoes, he said, with hard soles and no shoelaces. You can smell the laces? Asked Kathy. No, said DJ. I just told you there weren't any laces. Mr. Kidswatter's voice came over the speaker. Good morning, students. It's another great day here at... There was a sound of papers rustling. Wayside School. For lunch today, Miss Mush will be serving rainbow stew. It will be the greatest lunch ever. Let me do this. 15 floors beneath them, Miss Mush felt her stomach tighten. She, too, heard Mr. Kidswatter's morning announcement. Now the pressure was on. She climbed the ladder and stared down into the bubbling pot. Her face was covered with soot and sweat. Something orange, she decided. How about oranges? Suggested Mr. Pepperator. Too obvious, said Miss Mush. Carrots? I suppose, said Miss Mush, although carrots didn't feel right to her. Inspiration struck. 18 pumpkins, she exclaimed. Each pumpkin made a giant splash as Miss Mush and Mr. Pepperator took turns tossing them into the pot. After all the pumpkins were added to the stew, a tiny smile crept across Miss Mush's face. It was a tiny smile that all great artists know well. After years of self-doubt, she started to believe that she was on the verge of creating something truly wonderful. But it was just a quick smile, and then back to work. The doubts always return. The lunch bell kaboinked, and the children descended upon the cafeteria. Rainbow stew, said Benjamin. It sounds like it could be good. Don't let the name fool you, warned Todd. The better the name, the worse it tastes. Remember when she made Midnight Madness? Asked Paul. Don't even say it, snapped Leslie. I was up all night running around in circles. Miss Mush and Mr. Pepperator stood shoulder to shoulder as the children lined up. They had finished the stew only moments before. I hope they like it. I hope they like it, Miss Mush whispered. They will, Mr. Pepperator assured her. He wore short pants, black socks, and no shoes. Miss Mush hoped he was right, but all her doubts had returned. Her apron was splotched with lots of bright colors, but the rainbow stew looked like lumpy grayish-brown mud. She didn't understand it. What had happened to all the colors? Marisa reached the front of the line. Miss Mush scooped some rainbow stew into a bowl and handed it to her. Thank you, Miss Mush, said Marisa, always polite. Sorry, it was supposed to be a bit more colorful, exclaimed Miss Mush. I don't know what went wrong. Joy was next. Sorry, Miss Mush said again as she handed a bowl to Joy. Sorry, Ron, she said. Sorry, Dee Dee. Sorry, Joe. Sorry, John. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Allison and Rondi sat at one end of a long table. Are you going to eat it? Rondi asked Allison. I have a tangerine in my pocket, said Allison. Maybe I'll just eat that. Rondi watched as Allison slowly removed the entire peel in just one piece. Dee Dee counted the points of her fork. DJ swirled his plastic fork through the gray muck. Well, here goes, he announced. He poked his fork into something solid. It could have been a vegetable, or maybe a piece of meat, or perhaps a shoe. He lowered his fork. Maybe later, he said. Looks delicious, Kathy said enthusiastically. She took a big spoonful, brought it to her mouth, and swallowed. Yummy, she declared. The other kids couldn't be sure. They could never tell anymore when Kathy was speaking in opposites. Calvin stabbed something gooey with his fork. He brought it to his mouth, chewed a while, and then chewed some more. Well, asked Phoebe. Calvin wasn't sure how to describe it. Red, he said at last. Red? Questioned Allison. That's a color, not a taste. And blue, said Calvin. Rondi took a bite. She chewed a while. Purple, she declared. I taste yellow, said Todd. Dana swallowed. Pink, she exclaimed. John finished chewing, then swallowed. Kind of blue-green, he said. It's delicious, said Shari. Purple and green with yellow polka dots. The more they chewed, the more colors they tasted. That's silly, said Allison. She took a bite. Her eyes shone. She tasted orange with green and purple stripes and a black outline. Do you like it? Asked Rondi. Only the best lunch ever, said Allison. Mr. Pepperator grabbed and shook Miss Mush's arm. They like it, he said excitedly. Look at them. They really like it. Miss Mush didn't say a word. A tear rolled down her sweaty and sooty cheek. Did you write down the recipe? He asked. Miss Mush shook her head. There's no recipe, she whispered. No two rainbows are the same. She gazed out across the lunchroom. This was all she ever wanted. Everybody chewed. And that's it, second graders. There's Louis Sachar again. That's the end of chapter 30, Wayside book number 4. I hope you enjoyed it. This was my first time reading it as well. See you soon, second graders.